Well, welcome back to part 2 of my battery bombed LC2 video. So I've gone ahead and finished recapping the LC2 board that started working. I've got it booted up over here and it's still showing that it has 2 megs of RAM. So I wanted to try to troubleshoot that today, as well as to see why we can't get SIMs to work when we put them in the SIM slots. One thing I did notice on this board when it was booted up into 4 megs, if I kind of put any pressure on the RAM chips, it seemed to freeze up completely. So I'm guessing there might be some battery gunk or just some general corrosion under those RAM sims that are soldered to the board. So I might start by cleaning that off a little bit better, but we'll see where it goes. So let me get the camera set up over there so you can see what I'm seeing, and we'll jump right into it. All right, so we are booted up. As you can see, I've got all new capacitors installed here. I did mix and match tantalum and electrolytic caps just because that's what I happen to have on hand here. It shouldn't be a problem, but probably if I was buying caps, I would stick with one as opposed to mixing those up. If we go to the sound control panel, sound is working on this machine, assuming that it has enough RAM to actually open the sound control panel, which I think it should. Yeah, not enough memory to do it. But it does chime. I got these, cheap little speakers here, so I can hear it chime when it starts up. So as for troubleshooting, like I said, when it was booted up and thought it had 4 megs of memory, which it actually does, as opposed to the 2 that it thinks it has now, I think I touched one of these chips, and that caused things to freeze up. Now I'm feeling them to see if any of them feel warm, as if they've gone bad or something. I don't think that's going to be the case here, but they all feel pretty much the same. Warm, but not hot for sure. And just poking them there didn't cause anything to fail. So what I would like to do is to just restart it and see if I can't get 4 megs to show up again, so I can poke at it and see if that in fact does cause it to lock up. Now I was doing this before where I tell it to restart. It doesn't seem to actually want to restart or shut down. I do have to do a hard switch there. I don't know if that's software related just with the Mac OS version that's on here or not, but we'll go ahead and just do a hard power cycle. And I was talking, but it did chime, so you maybe heard that, maybe not. It's really quiet with these non-powered speakers, but the sound is working. It's kind of unusual to have that. Usually when these capacitors leak, they get under the sound circuitry and under the sound chip here, and that just wreaks havoc with it. Some of the other guys that recap these things for a living, like Amiga of Rochester, he'll take all of these things off when he's cleaning these boards and really get underneath them and make sure that there's no problem there with that stuff. But if it works, it works in my case. Anyway, we've still got 2 megs here, so no luck with getting the 4 megs. So I'm just going to, I guess, try to shut it down again, which will fail. So I'll get that guy shut down, or at least attempt to shut it down, power that off. And I just want to have another inspection of the RAM here just to see what it looks like. So we'll take the VRAM sim out, disconnect the power supply, and just really get some light over here so we can kind of see if there's anything that looks like it's suspect. I did notice that on this very first chip here, these legs on the top right here, and there's no way I'm going to be able to show that on camera, but they look a little funky. They don't quite look like all the other legs, as if maybe some of the metal had been eaten away, but they're not rusty, so I don't think that that is the case. It might just be a manufacturing defect or something. And then there is some gunk on these legs as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is just a little scrubby scrub with some 99% IPA. Just pour it right on there. And I'll use my venerable electric toothbrush to try to see if I can't clean up anything either under or around these pins. I'm guessing if any of these chips have failed because of the corrosion, it's these top 2 here, because the corrosion dripped this way, ran along here, hit these 2 chips probably, and you can see it ran under here, under the RAM sims, the slots here, and then it might have actually stopped there, I'm not sure. But there is some rust here, so it probably hit these and ran along this way and caused damage to these pins here. So seems like just these first two chips are in question. So we'll give those a clean, see if that makes any kind of difference. And then I will use my multimeter to do some continuity testing on the legs, just to make sure that everything is connected. And I have a feeling it's going to be. I'm just going to touch the pad and then touch the top of the pin. Alright, those all seem like they're connected to each other. I may need to go through the other ones as well. Of course, it's possible that something else has happened in here. So what I will do, now that I've kind of just pushed down on everything, let's go ahead and pop the VRAM sim back in. I think the other problem could be that with the damage on this socket here, certainly could be some pins connected to this RAM bus, so that could be an issue there. I just want to power it up and do some poking with the voltage meter while it's running, see if we can see anything unusual there. Alright, so at least on the first chip, all the voltages seem okay. So I do want to actually now boot it back up into Mac OS and see if any of the stuff we've done has gotten it to show the 4 volts or not. So I'd really like to get back in that state, 4 volts, 4 megs. So I'd really like to get back into that state so I can see if, you know, pushing down here does cause the issue or if that was just happenstance. So we'll let this boot up and give that another shot. Just to further complicate things, I am going to install the sims here, and a little bit of deoxit in there. Just to see what happens, because I know I put this in before and it wouldn't boot at all. I'm curious if that's still the same case with the new capacitors. I would imagine that it would be. I don't think any of the capacitors I replaced have anything to do with the RAM over here. At least not, you know, besides those 3. So now I'm curious to see how much RAM it thinks it shows. So if it sees the 2, I think these are 4 meg sticks. So if it sees the 8 megs here, and it's supposed to have 4 on board, but it ignores 2 megs, does it ignore the 2 megs from on board, or does it ignore the 2 megs from the RAM expansion? That's an interesting question. But anyway, deoxit seems to have resolved the issue with these. I know there was some rust on the actual pins of the sockets, so I guess that's not super surprising. That, you know, I've also scrubbed them with the isopropyl as well here and there when I'm around that area cleaning. All right, well let's take a gander, see what it says. 4 megs of RAM. So I'm guessing these are 1 meg sims. I didn't look at them. These came in one of these 2 that had never booted up with it, so I don't recall which one they were in. But they're working now, so that's a plus. So if I had 2 4 meg sims, which I might have, that could mean that we could get up to the full RAM. But I'd really like to correct the issue here. Just push on the board a little bit, see if anything breaks. Yeah, nothing, everything's still running. Yeah, everything's good. Alright, well let me shut it down. I'm going to see if I can find some larger sims while I'm at it, and then go back to working on, I think, their final remaining issue, which is this 2 to 4 meg problem that it's having. Just looking at it, I do see that these chips here have some gunker on them as well. I don't know what they do, but since they're close to the RAM, it could be RAM. They're also on the serial ports, so more than likely they're just serial port controllers. So I don't think that's going to affect anything. This chip here looks a little crusty as well, so I'm going to give it a clean. But yeah, I think otherwise things look pretty good. Alright, so I've been looking over this board, checking things, checking continuity. everything seems okay. I did post to the vintage Apple Macintosh preservation group on Facebook. Talked to a couple guys on there and got some good tips, but continued to just experiment with it. So let me show you where we're at now. So if the RAM's here, if I push down on this with my fingers and turn the system on, what I found is that if I do this and keep my fingers here, keep pressure on the RAM, then it does boot up showing 4 megabytes. So let's just do that. Alright, so we're loaded up into Mac OS, still applying pressure here. If I go to About This Macintosh, you can see that it shows a full 4 megabytes here. Now, as soon as I take my fingers off, the system completely freezes. We get nothing. So, could be a trace somewhere in there that's making a good connection when there's pressure, or it could be these RAM chips maybe just not making a great connection. Like I said, I did go through with my multimeter and continuity and tested out every pair of RAM to make sure things were good, and everything did check out there, so I'm not 100% sure it's the RAM, but I think that's as good a place as any to start, is to just reflow these connections here. I'm just going to start with the 2 chips closest to the camera, because that's where the battery goo flowed. So if any of them are more likely to have a problem than any of the others, it's going to be those 2. So we'll start there and see if that makes any sort of difference. So I'm just going to hit these with some flux. And if any pins that look suspect, it's the 8, or is it 10? It's the 10 on the very first chip closest to the camera. Let me just untangle my iron here a little bit. Let's see if I can find the good solder. Where I put it, here we go. So I'm just going to hit each of these pins, a little bit of solder. See if we can't get any sort of a better connection here out of all these. Alright, so with those 40 pins being reflowed, just checking for bridges here. I think we look okay. So let's give that a shot without putting any pressure on it, see if that has made any sort of difference. Well, it's booting, so we didn't make it worse. And I do believe that solved the problem, because I think it would have skipped all the rest of the extensions here if it only had 2 megs of RAM. So that ended up being a pretty simple fix. I spent a lot of time looking this board over, up and down. And like I said, I tested continuity on these pins to the other chips. The bus looked good, so it must have just been a real spotty connection, enough where the meter would make a connection, but when it was running without pressure, it wouldn't. Thinking about it, when I was testing these, I was pushing down on the chips, on the tops of the legs with my probes from my multimeter, like this. So if it was a real spotty connection, that definitely would have been putting pressure on those legs. So I guess that does potentially explain what happened. Check the RAM here. And yeah, she's at 4 megs. So I think we can call this board, other than needing a final clean. There's definitely still a bunch of this gunk on here that I don't think is ever going to come off, but not causing any problems. It's been neutralized, and it's just kind of on top of some traces here with some staining. So I'll do my best to get that cleaned up, but I don't think that's going to be looking brand new ever. And then what I do want to do is see if I can find some 30-pin sims to shove in here. Alright, and we are now showing the full 10 megs of RAM. So that's 4 here, 4 here, 4 here. And according to Apple, with the LC2 line, 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 10. So perfect. Alright, so I think this system is ready to go. What we need to do now is figure out the power supply situation. So let's start looking at these power supplies. This one looks terrible. To be completely honest, I'm not even sure it's going to come out. It's kind of just, there we go, we're rusted into place. It's rusted to the bottom case. This poor machine, the things it has suffered. Oh boy, look at that. So I don't have a lot of hope for this one. Of course, it could just be the case that's completely destroyed here. I don't want to set this on my bench either. I don't want that rust all over. Let's look at the other one. And this one doesn't look like it's going to be much better. Yeah, okay. Good stuff. So you can see the battery goop here on this one. I think this was the worst of the two boards, which I would say now completely given up on any hope of restoring. So we've got these two power supplies here. Let's take them apart, see how bad the carnage is inside. Because the carnage outside is quite bad. Alright, well, to be honest, the board itself looks like it's actually in undamaged shape. And of course all these capacitors probably have leaked, or are about to leak, because that's what the LC power supplies do. This one is TDK brand. I don't think any one brand is better than any other brand. I think they all leak. And again, it's not the manufacturer's fault. It's from the capacitor plague, where capacitors are being made with false electrolytic components. But yeah, I don't see any real damage on here whatsoever. This thing might actually just power up. So where I do see damage is kind of on the end here. Now these pry apart and you can get the mains and the switch in and out. I think that's going to be a little tricky. Let's try to get that out without damaging anything else. Alright, so we got the power supply out of its rusty housing, and again, everything looks surprisingly okay. Let's set that aside. Let's take a look at this other one. I'm trying to keep these parts together, so if we do reassemble one of these, we'll have the right parts. This one is an Aztec. And just from initial inspection, this power supply is in much worse shape. I'm not sure if you can see it, but up here there's a ton of corrosion on the board, rust kind of all over. I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to get that screw out. Still rusty. Yeah, it's not turning. All right, so I think we have the candidate for testing. So I'll take this stuff and I will e-waste it. No point in keeping this because it's never going to work. Goes in the e-waste bin. Looking at this power supply, very likely needs a recap. And as luck would have it, I do actually have a TDK power supply recap kit for one of these. Just happen to have it in a box over here. This is from Console 5. Yeah, you can go onto Mouser or DigiKey and get all the caps separately, and it's not
difficult at all, but you can also get these for just a couple bucks more from Console 5, and it's everything you need all together, so you don't have to worry about trying to find the right caps and everything like that. So that's going to make this a lot easier. I don't have to go digging around for the right caps. So we'll just start by, I'll start by opening this up and then dumping it out. Let's start with the big one. What I'm going to do is just double check to make sure I've got polarity right and everything here. Based on this printouts, this one is negative that way, negative is down for these 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then this way for these 2. Yep, looks good. Looks like I didn't screw it up too badly. So what I would like to do is plug it in and try it out. Alright, so to do that, I'm going to take this cord that's not plugged in, plug it in. Oh, we got these tabs here in the way, no problem. Now, we'll leave it switched to on and put it up on its side so that make sure nothing is shorted. Make sure all this stuff is out of the way here. And plug it in and see if anything explodes. Nothing exploded. Very good news. So now that these capacitors are charged, I do want to be careful not to touch anything on here while I let it discharge. So the next step is to reassemble. So I think that's unfortunately where we have to call it for this video. I don't want to make these videos too long. So I think we made a lot of good progress today. Still a little bit more work to go though. So I just want to say happy Macintosh to everyone who's made it this far, and we'll see you in part 3.